Must be pretty good. He restarted 17th and already knocking on the door of the top 10.
Yeah, and he's still on the bottom of the racetrack. But you see these guys that run the high side. You see AJ up here on the high side. You see Tony tucks in under right here in the middle of the racetrack. The 33 gets a good roll through the middle, but this momentum on the high side carries him down the straightaway.
Look at Stewart getting aggressive in the middle.
Yeah, well, he knows he's got good tires right here, and these guys are holding him up a little bit. Because, I mean, when they drop the green flag, those first 8 or 10 laps, right, 8 or 9 laps of the race, he made some time. And you see, just like Jeff Gordon's car, he can drive into the middle. Tony lets the thing slide up, takes the position away. Even though AJ will be able to close back in on him because of that momentum, Tony's got the position.
But you kind of expect it from the 14 because he was such a good car to begin with. They had a little hiccup in the pits, but the 14 car is strong, so you kind of expect him to get back up there. It's just when he gets a little bit closer, when he gets about to 6, 7, it's going to get a little bit tougher for him.
Yeah, it gets a lot tougher. It's the closer you get to the sharp end of the stick, the harder it gets to pass each other. And you saw right there, the 99 car, as Jeff drove up on him, stuck his hand out the window and gave Jeff the position getting into turn 3. These guys, the funny thing about racing like this, especially this time in the race, 50-some odd laps into the race, is if you end up racing a guy side by side for 3 or 4 laps, you lose a lot of time. And Jeff, and you look at these guys, they're smart enough to know, I don't want to lose time to the leader or those guys behind me catch up.
Teammates racing for 3rd. That's Truex in the Napa 56. Right behind him in the Tums 00 would be David Rudiman. These two cars have been very strong since the beginning. Rudiman started 7th and has stayed inside the top 10, and they got to be happy with the way they're running tonight, Phil.
They are, Adam. He actually worked his way up to the 4th position before the caution flag came out. He's reported to his crew chief, Rodney Childers, that the car is really, really tight now, way tighter than it was before, and they adjusted air out of the right front tire to try to free the car up a little bit. Way, way tighter right now for David Rudiman.
But Rudiman is really, he was 4th on that first run. He's 4th right now. He's really kind of maintained or stayed right there with Truex. And I thought Truex is running in the middle of the racetrack now to the bottom, where that first run Truex was up in the white stuff. So whatever adjustment they've made, he's had to move to a different place on the racetrack to make his car work.
And here's going to be the key. As this night continues and the sun continues to go down, how many of these guys that are inside the top 10 right now, is you see the sun peeking over the wall in turns 3 and 4. How many of these drivers inside the top 10 are going to be able to stay there? Because you got to stay in front of the track.
Yeah, this is where the communication between the driver and the crew chief and the team is going to be so important. And listening to the crew chief say, the driver's got to say, I'm loose here, I'm tight here, whatever. You see these guys start down the backstretch, and I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but when you turn in here at 170 or 80 miles an hour, boom, and there's the sun right in you, you don't see anything for 100 yards or so in there. It's like somebody being in a dark room and flashing a light or flashing a camera in your eyes for a minute. There's a dot there. But this is where the communication factor is going to be so big. These guys have to stay up with the racetrack now to understand what adjustments they need to make in the future.
Fans want more TNT coverage? The Coca-Cola in-car camera on Race Buddy lets you ride shotgun with Coca-Cola racing family drivers. Check out the Coca-Cola in-car camera on NASCAR.com's Race Buddy now.
And going back to what Kyle was talking about, you need to make big swings right now because the track is changing, like you said. It's one of those deals where you can't, if your car feels pretty good and you want to make a change, you almost have to go a little bit too far. You have to go further because the track is going to change so much. And McMurray here is making up some ground on the 48.
We mentioned on that restart how aggressive he was on the back bumper. He was a half a second back, and now you see him closing once again. Two different lines for these drivers in 3 and 4 there, too.
Yeah, 2 different lines. And you hear guys talk about it all the time. And the king and those guys, you said, you got to pass people where they ain't. You see the 48 move up in front of him right now because the 48's like, and his spotter's telling him, Jamie's running high. You might want to try that groove to see where he's at because he's closing on you. He's making some time. Where Jimmy has been predominantly from the middle of the racetrack to the bottom of the racetrack and made time on everybody he's raced against. Jamie's up there running just a touch lower, maybe a half a car lane lower than what the 56 car was running that first line, the first run.
This is the most laps Jimmy Johnson's led in his career to start a race. Impressive. He's led all of them so far tonight. Back at Chicagoland Speedway, and you still have time to get your picks in for the $1 Million Fan Challenge. You can win up to $1 million, and I'm guessing Jimmy Johnson is going to be in everyone's top 10. He looks good in the early portion of this race. Let's go through the field. Leading us off, Matt Yoakum.
Tons of motivation tonight for Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canals with the 48 team. 104 racetracks. They've never scored a cup victory here in Chicago. Yarding the competition now, he says the car much better rolling through the center and a lot better on exit. But it definitely was a handful early on racing the one of Jimmy McMurray, who now says his car has gone to the tight side. He's trying to change up his line to help the balance of his race car, but he has lost a little bit of distance to Johnson, Ralph.
Well, Martin Truex is running in third right now in car 56. He was really good in that first run. Right now, he's struggling a little bit in turns 3 and 4. Problem is, he can't get the gas all the way down as he's working his way to turns 3 and 4, Phil.
Ralph, remember we talked about the 0-0 of David Rudin being a little bit too tight, even tighter than he was the first run. He has the 5th best average finish in the last 10 races to move up to 17th in points. Now, as we go back to the next guy, the 16 of Greg Biffle, he's reporting that he's pushing the right front tire off the car. You see him move up to the top of the racetrack. Comes in here 10th in points. Extremely optimistic about his chances, Marty, for a great run tonight.
Well, Phil, Jeff Gordon driving a brand new race car this weekend. The way they want to head to build race cars for the chase. He loves the way the front end turns, and he just radioed to Steve Letarte. You're never going to hear me say this again. We have way too much front downforce on this car. I can't run the bottom. Car's way too loose on exit, Matt.
Jason Hedleski, Carl Edwards spotter, has been telling him the different lines that Jimmy Johnson and Jimmy McMurray have been running. Right now, he's soldiering on back in 7th. His car better on this run than the first. The track bar adjustment has helped, but it's still a tick tight on entry. Meanwhile, Tony Stewart making his way back up to the lead area of the race, currently in 8th. What they're going to do on their next stop, so they don't have an issue again on pit road, they're going to change the tape on pit road route and have Stewart pit closer to the wall on their next stop.
Well, Matt, you always got to find a way to keep the guys behind you, and that's what Juan Pablo Montoya is trying to do right now. His car is a little too tight, so the crew is working with him on the air, not the air pressure in the tires, but the air around him, teaching him how to use the air to keep the air off of the guy behind him to make it tougher for the car behind him to get around him. The car behind him right now, closing in, is Clint Boyer in the number 33. He just moved himself inside the top 10. Early on, Marty, that car was loose on throttle. Now it's gotten tight.
Well, for Jeff Burton, they've kind of gone backwards with his 31 car. He did take off pretty quick on the initial run, loose the last run. What they did is they took out a quarter pound of air pressure from all the tires, trying to give him more overall grip. It didn't work. Burton said the car much worse. In fact, it made it looser. Larry?
Yeah, quite a bit of parity with Richard Petty Motorsports right now here earlier in the race. Casey Kane in the 9 is in 11th. Paul Menard in the 98 is 13th. A.J. Allmendinger in the 43 is 14th. And Elliott Sadler, who led some laps at Daytona in that 19 car, 16th. A lot happening in the 19 camp this week. A little bit of a crew chief change. Wally Rogers out. Todd Parrott moved over from Roush Fenway to look after this car. Todd and Elliott Sadler won races together at Robert Yates Racing, but the biggest thing, it was reported this week, Elliott Sadler will not be returning to Richard Petty Motorsports in 2011, Adam.
And Larry, plenty of motivation for them tonight. The Children's Miracle Network on his car. If Elliott wins, he gets $1 million for the Children's Miracle Network. Now, here's an interesting group of cars. Dale Earnhardt Jr. running in the 22nd position. Sam Hornish Jr., Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick. We talked about drivers starting deep in the field, and Kyle, these guys still have some work to do.
Yeah, and this is really a little bit surprising because these guys started deep in the field. They caught a caution. They were able to go in and make an adjustment, and guess what? They're still deep in the field. They're not making the progress. We saw Tony Stewart. These guys are 22nd, 23rd. Right along through there. We saw Tony Stewart start 17th, and he's worked his way back up to 8th right now. These guys can't move. Whatever adjustment they made was not a big enough swing at it, was not the right thing.
Yeah.
So
and the 2 car there too, he's been stuck back there the whole race. He hasn't made any ground up.
And this is incredibly surprising for the 2 because these guys have been hot over the last month and a half. So ever since we ran the All-Star race, these guys have been on a streak. Everywhere they go, they're a leader.